Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Hi everyone, I'm Brittany. Welcome to Randomness, where we talk about a little bit of everything, the deep, the weird, and the real. So take a breath, open your mind, and let's get into it. Okay, I want to start today with a question, and I want you to actually sit with it for a second before we dive in. Where were you just now? Like before you pressed play on this episode, or maybe even in the first 30 seconds of it, where did your mind go? Were you thinking about something you said to someone earlier today? Running through your to-do list? Replaying a conversation from last week? Or imagining a scenario that hasn't happened yet and maybe never will? If the answer is yes to any of those, awesome. You are a completely normal human being with a completely normal brain, and today we're going to talk about why. So, we're talking about mind wandering, and I don't mean like zoning out in like an unproductive way. I mean the genuinely fascinating, scientifically documented, deeply human phenomenon of your mind going somewhere other than where your body currently is, which, as it turns out, is happening almost half of your waking life. So, here's the number that stopped me when I first came across this research. 46.9%. That is the average percentage of waking hours that people's minds are wandering, thinking about something other than what they're actually doing. Nearly half of your entire waking life. The thing I find even more interesting than the number itself, the rate of mind wandering, is not even across all activities. It varies enormously depending on what you're doing. People mind wander most when they're in the shower, which honestly makes complete sense. And least when they're having sex, which, also makes sense. And every other activity falls somewhere between those two extremes. What that tells us is something really important. Mind wandering isn't random. It isn't some malfunction that strikes at unpredictable moments. It happens most when whatever you're doing doesn't require enough of your attention to fully capture it. The mind wanders into the space that the current activity leaves open. It's filling a gap. It's doing what it does when it isn't sufficiently occupied by what's in front of it, which means that the present moment, being fully here, fully in your body, fully in what's actually happening, is not actually the default state of human consciousness. The elsewhere is the default. The present is the override. And according to this research, the override happens less than half the time. Okay, so let's talk about what mind wandering actually is, because it's more specific and more interesting than just zoning out. Mind wandering is defined as the experience of thinking about something other than what you're currently doing, where there's a structural separation between what your body is doing and what your mind is attending to. Like your hands are washing dishes, your mind is 3 years in the past or 6 months in the future, or in a conversation that happened differently in your head than it did in real life. And that wandering can go a lot of different places. It can go toward pleasant things, daydreams, fantasies, anticipation of something you're looking forward to, memories that make you smile. It can go toward neutral things, just processing, planning, mentally organizing, or it can go toward unpleasant things, rumination, worry, regret, replaying things you wish you had done differently. The direction your mind tends to wander in says something, not something to judge yourself for, of course, but something that's worth noticing. Because if you start to pay attention to where your mind goes when it's left to its own devices, you'll start to understand something about what's living underneath the surface of your daily life, what's unresolved, what you're longing for, what you're afraid of, what your inner world is quietly preoccupied with while your outer world keeps moving. Your wandering mind is not noise, it's a signal. And here's where it gets really fascinating from a neuroscience angle. And I promise I'm not going to make this like too sciencey, but this part is pretty interesting. When your mind wanders, your brain is not idle. It is actually running on what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a set of interconnected brain regions that activate specifically when we are not focused on the external world. When you're resting, daydreaming, mind wandering, remembering, imagining. For a long time, the default mode network was considered kind of useless. The brain on standby, just ticking over until something more important demanded attention. But more recent research has completely overturned that idea. It turns out that the default mode network is doing some of the most sophisticated mental work your brain performs. Things like integrating memories and making meaning out of past experiences, processing emotions, especially complex ones that didn't get fully processed when they first happened, imagining future scenarios and mentally simulating how they might play out, making connections between ideas and experiences that your focused, task-oriented brain doesn't have time to make, developing empathy by simulating other people's inner experiences, imagining how things feel from another perspective. This is not idle work. This is some of your brain's most important work. And it happens specifically in the spaces when you're not focused, in the shower, on the road, in the in-between moments of your day. When your mind wanders away from the task at hand, it might be going to do something your brain actually needs to do. But anyway, no. Have you ever been completely stuck on a problem, turning it over and over, getting nowhere, and then stepped away, went for a walk, took a shower, whatever, and the answer just came to you? That is your default mode network doing its thing. When you stop forcing the focused attention and let your mind drift, it can make the connections your narrowly focused brain couldn't. Creativity, insight, problem solving. These often happen not in the moments of intense concentration, but in the spaces between them. And mind wandering also plays a crucial role in processing emotion. When something hard happens, like a difficult conversation, a loss, a disappointment, your focused mind usually doesn't have the capacity to fully process it in the moment. It shelves it. And then later, when you're doing something routine, driving, cooking, doing laundry, your mind wanders back to it. And that's actually your brain doing the work of integrating the experience, making meaning out of it, finding a way to file it into your larger understanding of your life and yourself. And then there's the beautiful, underrated gift of imagination. The mind that wanders into fantasy, into imagined futures, into creative worlds, into scenarios that haven't happened and may never happen is a mind that is rehearsing possibility, that is keeping alive the dimension of life that exists beyond what is current and concrete. And daydreaming gets a bad reputation because, well, it just does, but the capacity to imagine beyond the present is one of the most distinctly human things about us. It is where art comes from, and hope, and the ability to envision a life different from the one you're currently living. Now, the other side, because mind wandering is not always the creative, healing, imaginative experience I just described, and the research is honest about this. Studies have found that people tend to be less happy when their minds are wandering than when they are present, regardless of what activity they're doing. Even if the task is boring, people generally report higher well-being when their attention is actually on it versus when their mind is somewhere else. And the direction of the wandering matters enormously. Pleasant daydreaming feels different from anxious rumination. Imagining a future you're looking forward to feels different than replaying a painful memory on loop. The mind that wanders into worry, into worst case scenarios, into the mental rerunning of things that went wrong is not doing restorative work. It is burning energy and generating suffering. Rumination, in particular, the repetitive, circular thinking about negative events or feelings, is one of the most unhelpful things the wandering mind can do, and it's also one of the most common. The mind left to its own devices under stress or after difficulty often defaults to rumination, and not because it's masochistic, but because it's trying to solve something. It keeps returning to the problem, turning it over, looking for resolution, and when it doesn't find one, it loops back again and again. And understanding this distinction between the wandering that helps and the wandering that hurts is one of the most useful things you can develop an awareness of in your own mental life. And I want to stay with this idea for a moment, the idea that the present is not our default state, that the elsewhere is where we actually live most of the time, in the background of our lives. Because in a culture that is absolutely obsessed with presence, with mindfulness, with being in the now, with the goal of full, continuous, embodied attention to the present moment, the idea that nearly half of your waking life is spent somewhere else can feel like failure, like you're not doing it right, like you should be more here, more often. But what if that framing is too harsh? What if the wandering mind is not evidence of failure, but evidence of richness, of a mind that is full of memories and stories and worries and dreams and unfinished emotional business and creative possibility? A mind that cannot quite be contained by just the present moment because it contains so much more than the present. The goal, maybe, is not to eliminate the wandering. The goal is to become more conscious of it, to notice when your mind has left the room, to have some say in where it goes when it does, to cultivate the ability to come back gently without judgment when you want to be present, and to let the wandering do its good work when that's what it needs to do. So what does this look like practically? Because I always want to leave you with something real. Start noticing where your mind goes, not to judge it, just to observe. When you catch yourself somewhere else, get curious. Where did I go? Was it the past or the future? Was it pleasant or anxious? Is this somewhere my mind goes often? What does that tell me about what's living just beneath the surface of my day? Create space for good wondering. If your best thinking happens in the shower, on a walk, in those in-between moments, protect those moments. Don't fill every gap with a podcast or a phone or a scroll. Let your mind have room to drift, to make its connections, to do the background processing that your focused hours don't have time for. Some of your best ideas and most important emotional insights will come from that space. Interrupt the loops. When you notice that your wondering has turned into rumination, that your mind is going back to the same painful place for the 5th time and finding nothing new there, that's when a gentle interruption is kind rather than avoidant. You don't have to force yourself into the present, but you can redirect. A physical movement, a change of environment, a conscious choice to think about something else or to do something that requires enough attention to pull you into the present. Use it as a journaling prompt at the end of the day or in the morning. Ask yourself, where did my mind go today when it wandered? What kept coming up? What was my brain quietly working on? The answers are a window into your inner life that's worth paying attention to. And practice coming back without the self-criticism. Every mindfulness teacher will tell you that the practice is not staying present. The practice is noticing you've wondered and coming back over and over without making it mean something bad about you. The wondering is going to happen nearly half the time. Remember, the practice is the returning. So your wandering mind is not a problem to be fixed. It's not evidence of distraction or weakness or a failure to be present enough. It is a deeply human feature of consciousness, one that serves real and important functions when it is working well, and one that causes real suffering when it is left completely unattended. The wondering is going to happen. The default is the elsewhere. What you have some power over is where the elsewhere takes you and what you do with what you find there. Your mind wanders because it is full, because you have lived things and felt things and loved things and feared things and dreamed things that don't fit neatly into the present moment. That's not a flaw. That is the evidence of a rich, full human inner life. And that inner life, even the wandering parts, maybe especially the wandering parts, is worth getting to know. Anyways, that's today's episode. And this one surprised me a little in how much I enjoyed it. It's very interesting, but I hope it surprised you and how much it made you think. If you notice your mind wandering today, I hope you get a little curious about where it went instead of frustrated that it left. And share this with someone who needs permission to stop fighting their own brain. And if it resonated, a review means everything to me. Just saying. And before I let you go, remember, a wandering mind is not an undisciplined mind. It's a full one doing work that your focused self doesn't have the bandwidth to do. Remember, where your mind goes when it's left alone is not random. It's telling you something true about what lives beneath the surface of your life, and that is always worth listening to. The goal was never to be perfectly present every moment. The goal is to know yourself well enough to come home to yourself whenever you need to. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow. And remember, keep your energy grounded, your mind open, and your curiosity alive.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.